1. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Life Edge. Now, today I am doing the Edge of Life by myself. Susan could not make it. She is stuck in some meetings that she couldn't get out of, and unfortunately, like it is in the world, work comes first. So our kudos to Susan. She will be back with us next week. But today we have a great guest, and she'll be on in a moment. Here we go. And we're back. I always have to remember when I'm doing different things, because right now we have our guest, Alice Acker. She is an instructional designer. She is a specialist in healthcare, an ex-Air Force captain, married to a submariner. That's an interesting combination. One's flying high and the other one's going way low. I don't know about that. You got to explain that one to us. And she's a great person to know. She's funny. She has a background in a lot of things. In the pre-show, I found out she was also studying acting for a while, which explains a lot of her funniness, I think. So, Alice, how are you today?
Excuse me, Rick. Are you saying I'm funny?
You're funny.
I'm funny. Oh, that's a good thing. Okay,
yeah, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Except when the funniness isn't funny, but we'll work about that later, right?
Sounds like a plan. And so you talk about the owls and Jamie and I kind of being opposites, that I was in the Air Force and he was in the submarine service. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. He's a bird watcher, so he's always looking up. I was trained as a botanist, so I'm always looking down.
That's funny.
So, yes, we kind of crisscross that way, but it all works.
One thing also that's kind of funny about you two is that, well, it's not really funny. He is actually, I call him the owl whisperer. You have a lot of owls out where you live. You're on an island somewhere around Seattle. And what do you have, about 20-something owls?
We have lots of owls.
Lots of owls.
There's an owl called the barred owl. And realize I'm not the expert, but I'm the expert by absorption because I live with the owl whisperer. So there's a bird called the barred owl. And up until, I think, about the 1960s, its range was east of the Mississippi River. But since the 1960s, this bird has just skyrocketed in population here in the West Coast. It's made it out to California, Oregon, obviously us in Washington. So Jamie studies those populations, and he's watched from maybe 6 breeding pair in 1 year till now he might have 30 breeding pair in 1 year on our island. And he knows these owls, and they have names. We've got Wanda, we have Francis, Francine. They all have names, and they kind of are part of the family.
And I heard from a joint friend of ours, Leva, who's in Belgium, that he actually got bit twice by them when they got jealous.
He did. In fact, one day he came home with holes around his eyes. And so I looked at the holes. I started counting them, and I counted 5 pierce marks. Realized that it was the owl who attacked him. So being the good wife that I am, instead of taking him to the emergency room immediately or cleaning them, I took out my camera to document it. So, and if you Google Jamie Acker owls, Rick, I swear you'll find that picture. And it's not a real pretty picture, but it is out there now.
Wow. Was that just from one hit?
Sorry.
1 hit, 5 shots?
Yeah, no, one hit, 5 talons.
Wow.
So when here,
so he didn't go here. Back. It wasn't a beak.
Inside.
It wasn't beak. It was the talons.
It was the talons because it was it was a dominating thing. It was trying to push away at him.
Interesting.
So, yeah, that's my life.
Yep. They're beautiful creatures, though. We have at least 2 or 3 owls in our backyard where we are, and occasionally about 1 in the morning, 12 midnight, maybe even 2 in the morning, one of them sits. It's at least a 2-foot owl. It's large. It just sits in the middle of the lawn behind our bedroom window and just goes, ooh, ooh. And he's looking right at the house. And I'm looking at him going, what you doing? And he just looks, doesn't say a word. I mean, doesn't talk, doesn't come close to us or anything, but coolest creature. And of course, the more I've learned about owls, I probably don't want to really go up to them unless I know what I'm doing.
I would say so.
They are pretty dangerous.
I do have a good California owl story for you.
Yeah.
A friend of ours lives near San Diego. And he has a cat, and the cat would be wandering around. And one day, a big old owl came, swooped, took the cat. And the folks watched their cat go off in the talons with the owl. About 6 weeks later, the owl came, pardon me, not the owl, the cat came back.
Came back.
It sounds like a song. And it said, boy, if I could tell you my story, you wouldn't believe it. But
yeah, I'm surprised you didn't kill him, actually. Huh.
It is amazing. Well, who knows what happened? What happens in the woods stays in the woods. So
that's
be careful if you have a cat.
That's true. And then the cat had an owl cat, right? No, we won't go there.
Don't go there.
Don't go there. So how'd you get into e-learning?
Real interesting. I've known I'm a geek all my life. It's one of those things that it's the steps towards admission. I admitted it very early on. My father used to have what was called a telex machine. Have you ever seen telex machines?
Yes, I used to work on them.
There you go. So I don't know how we would describe it, but data would be transmitted over these perforated tapes. And I don't know, like SOS almost.
Yeah.
And as like a 7-year-old kid, I just loved this thing. But of course, it was kind of like a fantasy world. So I went to college and did what I needed to do and went into business. But still, my whole hobby would be to break things on the computer. I would love to get inside and just break things. But I still had the business side. I decided I needed to work in an office and do the business thing. And as time went on, I realized more and more that I really wanted to do something with computers. I also realized that I love to teach. So I put the two together, e-learning, teaching. There you are.
So how long have you been in e-learning right now?
I've been in it since about 2002. Okay. I started with a company called HealthNet, which is down in your neck of the woods. And they gave me a lot of freedom. We had a great project where we had what's called a desktop that had different resources available to our customer service reps. So when they booted up, they could have a toolbox, they could see different movies, they could see things that all were related to doing their job, reference materials, et cetera. And we had a whole staff of graphic artists and designers, and they kind of let me do my thing. So I ended up project managing a whole series of vignettes. And we had our own folks, was before the days of Captivate and Articulate and all those things. So they actually developed it from scratch. So everything we had was built in-house. And I had the luxury, the freedom of having these guys at my command, more or less. So that's how I started.
That's pretty good. So you've seen the industry change in about 13 years.
I have.
Not necessarily for the better, but what do you see as some of the trends going on in the industry, good and bad, and where do you see the industry going?
Oh boy, Rick, that's a loaded question. I see a lot of movement away from fine graphics and design into just rapid development.
Right.
So, like I said, I had trained graphic artists that were doing my work for me that, we actually spent time and made sure it was right. And a lot of folks are converting their old decks into e-learning and not necessarily looking at whether it really does translate well into the screen. So in that sense, I think because we've made e-learning so easy, it's just kind of like going onto YouTube, we've made it so easy that the quality isn't necessarily as good as it was in some ways because it's not being monitored. So that's what I see. As far as where do I see it going, that's a tough question. I see it expanding still. What do you think? Do you see e-learning expanding?
I think it is. I'm not sure it's always expanding in the right direction, but it is expanding. I think that in the e-learning community, we're chasing wish lists versus reality. For example, everybody wants mobile learning. I don't know a lot of companies yet that have really totally embraced it, at least in certain financial, insurance, other healthcare. They're not ones to let data go very easily, including training data. So you don't see a lot of, at least for the end user, at least for the internal users. There are mobile things for clients and things like that, but not a heck of a lot for internal. I'm sure it's going to change with time, but I'm still not seeing tons of that, though the whole industry wants to head that way. Everybody wants to have a mobile solution, whether it's, I don't know if anybody's done any really great analysis other than made up stuff about what percentage of training is mobile now. It may be a large percent, it may be a small, I'd say it's a small percent at this point, but that could change. I think we're getting probably to what we used to call just-in-time learning or training, where people want snippets. They don't want the whole training thing. They want bits and pieces of it.
That's correct. And that's the way that the whole world is. We're used to seeing little snips now on the computer. We're not used to reading large articles in magazines or newspapers. People want to be entertained.
Yeah.
Al Whisper is a high school teacher, and he will tell me stories about kids just want him to show things. They don't want to do their homework. They don't want to study. So we're used to being things thrown at us rather than it being a back and forth. Now back to e-learning, my take on it is that, or M-learning specifically, is that there's certain things that cannot be done on a screen. I don't care how big iPhone gets or Android gets. There's certain things that cannot. If you're doing a software simulation that's a desktop app, how are you going to duplicate that onto a screen?
You don't. You don't.
Yeah. And of course, then there's firewalls as well. Like we're saying that, does a company really want their proprietary information floating around out there? They probably don't.
No.
So,
now, interestingly enough, you were in the military, you weren't in the Air Force, you were an officer. The military has been very successful at rapidly training people to do specific jobs. It seems like the public sector isn't as successful at rapidly training for specific jobs. They do train, they throw a lot of training at people, but I'm not so sure the training is as effective as, for example, it is in the military. Why do you think that is? Or do you even agree with that? And why do you think, if so, that is?
I do agree with that. And I think it's because when you're a part of the military, you're ingrained very fully into that organization. You wear the uniform. You exercise the customs and courtesies. You're immersed in it. Now, as an officer, I didn't have to live in a barracks. I lived in an apartment 27 miles away. However, 24 hours a day, I knew I was an Air Force officer. That's who I was. So I think when you're completely wed to an organization, when that's who you are, you're going to do a better job. You're going to learn because that's your duty to learn. And you know that other people's lives, other people depend on, with the extent that you know.
That's true. And by the way, we're in the missing co-host formation right here, I think.
Oh.
Yeah, one's missing. That's our missing co-host today. So we thought we'd give her a little bit of a flyby for you. So.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. Well, we could have actually a picture still of her, and you can
we
animate
could. We
her
just
mouth.
We didn't plan that until just now, so it just kind of came up.
I could give you my dog. My dog is behind me. So anyhow.
So, it is interesting because you're right. The military has a specific purpose, a specific set of things they need to train. And they have one thing that you don't get in a business as much. They can give an order and you have to learn it. It's a little bit different, even though, you don't always necessarily learn well when somebody gives you an order. In the private sector, you don't get orders, you get fired. So it's a little different.
A little different.
But I have noticed that a lot of training in a lot of corporations isn't necessarily functional. It's done to either comply with something, it's done to feel like you've trained somebody, but not necessarily to train someone adequately or thoroughly. It's a stopgap more often than not.
It's just a check mark.
It's a check mark. It's a check mark, and usually budget comes into effect. So nobody wants to spend too much on training because in business, one thing changes probably faster than the military or in schools. Things change quicker. Rules, processes, customers, clients, products, they all change a lot quicker than things change in other areas. So that's part of the things we're seeing. Now, you do a lot of work in medical. Medical changes pretty quickly, especially at the doctor level, nurse level. There's a lot of new techniques always coming out, new equipment, new processes. Have you done training in that area too, in that venue of the healthcare product area?
Well, a lot of that stuff comes straight from the vendors, to be honest, as part of when a hospital buys a piece of equipment, they buy a training package that comes with it. So I haven't touched that as much. What I'm very deeply involved with is electronic health records. And that is a huge game changer in healthcare these days. When you go to the doctor, in the old days, you'd see them have a notepad and they'd write down the things you said. Now they're turned to you very often and they're on the computer typing in the things that you've said, or they're asking you certain questions that are part of the algorithm. So what I do is I develop training for the doctors, the nurses, the technicians to be able to use that electronic health record documentation correctly. So it's huge, and there's a lot of reasons that we have it. Number one would be equality. That in the old days you couldn't understand a doc's writing. You know, people always made jokes about it,
and it's
but
true.
You couldn't understand it.
Yeah, and it's so true. You wonder, why do doctors? There must be a neuronal synapse disconnect between a doctor's hand and their brain, because you're right, they can't write with beans, most of them. I've seen some of the prescriptions go, how the heck do you know what? And the pharmacist has some sort of cognitive dissonance as well that can actually read that.
I think they take a course in physician handwriting. But,
they must.
But anyhow, something. But that's a big thing, the handwriting, the use of abbreviations, and the inconsistencies. So one day the nurse might ask you, well, how did you sleep last night? The next day, the nurse might not ask you that because the nurse is thinking of something else. So the electronic health records have done a great deal to standardize the questions that are asked. And they also do cool stuff like if someone says, oh, well, my temperature is 106 degrees and I just came back from visiting Western Africa and I have gastrointestinal issues, it'll flag. Ask if they have Ebola, you know, do this certain set. So in that sense, quality-wise, it's been a great thing. And the other thing that's very important is we know healthcare costs are very high. So what it's done is it gives reportable data to the government so the government can analyze utilization, see if it's proper, see if the hospitals have done the right thing towards safety and quality of care. So.
Yeah, but that's a whole other area where we can get into the good and the bad of the health. I won't go there, but we can get into some good and bad on healthcare forms and privacy and everything else. Not to mention what that data is actually used for, which is good and bad. I know in the past I've had friends who worked on healthcare systems, the programs themselves for HMOs, and they had fields that if they denied service, the more they denied, the more bonuses they got. So these are kind of not good things. And
not
that's
good things.
One of the problems with having a dad who died from an HMO who did nothing from the get-go to help him out. Yeah, I kind of know how that feels. It was just really bad. It's all about denying service. And you get to a certain age, they can deny it more readily because, well, you're not going to live that long anyway, so let's just off you. Yeah, we've seen it firsthand as a family, and it just go, wow, that's really pretty crappy. But there's also so many good things in healthcare that we never really do talk about. And that's why most people in the world come here for certain healthcare procedures because nobody else does them. Or as well. I remember back years ago, Canada, this is about 20 years ago, had 3 MRIs in the whole country. And we had, I think, 7 in Ventura County alone where we are. I was going, wow, that's a big, we're just one county. So there's we have a lot of healthcare electronics out here and instrumentation, which is great. Sometimes it's overused, but for the most part, doctors can get a lot more information out of that than they used to, which is a good thing. What do you find when in training people, whether it's for the healthcare forms or other things? What do you find your biggest challenges are in terms of training?
Too many experts out there that aren't experts. They will say it has to be done this way. This is the way it's always been. This is the way I want it to be. And it's not necessarily so. For example, e-learning, we've learned in the past, we've learned recently that half an hour of e-learning is not going to cut it. People are going to, back to what we were talking before about people wanting things thrown at them, snippets. They're going to get bored. They're going to check their email. They're going to zone out. They're going to be anywhere but learning. We've learned that e-learning to be effective should be anywhere between 3 to 7 minutes. You know this, maybe 10 minutes. But those are things that we have learned in the field that have changed, and we're evolving with them.
And it's not really something that's implemented all that often. We still, to this point, argue the point with clients. No, you really don't want a 1 hour straight course. No, we do. No, they're not going to learn from it. We don't care. But they won't learn from it. Therefore, they won't be able to use it. We don't care.
Exactly.
Well, how about they're wasting your money? We don't care. I give up. What do you do? Because one thing is most people in business or wherever don't really understand how people learn or how much people are given to do, so that the learning is one task of many. So therefore, how much of the time that they spend is actually usefully learning because they've got 100 other things that they're thinking about. And that's the problem. Like you said, 5-10 minutes is 10. I say 10 to 15 is max.
Well, 15 is
15 is probably
reaching it,
pushing it a little
especially in
bit.
something technical.
Yeah, that's true. Or even something that you really have to pay attention to, like that's usually something technical. It's hard to get into it all. And then let's say you finish an hour of training and you've done 1 hour straight. How much will you retain? You know, the old days, they used to say if you do e-learning, you're retaining 75% of what you learn, versus if you went to an instructor-led class, you'll probably retain 30 to 35%. I would disagree with that, because if you're watching a 1 hour course that's extremely boring, non-engaging, non-in context, non-relevant, you probably won't learn much, and you won't retain any more than you would if you were in the same equivalent class that's ILT. You might retain about an equal amount of nothing. And you know what nothing from nothing is?
Something.
Something. But what something? But can we quantify that something? That's the key. And that's a tough one. And of course, when you talk about quantifying things, then we have the LMS. LMS.
Oh boy.
The Learning Management Something.
That's true.
If you think about LMSs, most companies launch a course and make sure you finish the course, completed it, maybe even passed it. Though we don't like passing and failing records because they could be attached or subpoenaed by lawyers. So therefore, we never have anybody passing or failing. Therefore, you can never be accused of not remediating when somebody failed. We have complete and incomplete in many cases. And so that's what an LMS is used for. We're not using them for what they were originally designed for, which was tracking, but it was also analyzing the data, analyzing how people are responding to questions, how people respond to scenarios, so that they hopefully learn something. For example, again, let's go back to kind of the military. You may have training that is a scenario of how to deal with someone who got wounded in a certain way. Now, you have to know how to do that scenario, and it may be totally e-learning, or it could be a combination of e-learning and actual practice. You have to know how to fix, let's say if it's a medical situation, how to fix a wound, how to repair it enough to get them to a hospital. Now, that's something you can track pretty easily, and that's something that would let you know, is that medic doing a good job or not? Or are we going to put him out in the field and say, have at it, have fun? Probably not, because lives are at stake. But in most learning, it doesn't seem to matter if somebody learns or not, at least in the corporate world. There are, of course, exceptions to every rule. I'm just generalizing right now. But we've seen a lot of that in a lot of companies, where it's launch, bookmark, got a bookmark, and track. And that's it. Now, I'd say, okay, that's somewhat useful, so at least you know they've taken the training, or had a robot hand doing this a lot every 20 minutes. And sometimes they even track latency. They don't even do that much anymore. How long were you in the course? I remember in the old days that was important. Now I don't hear a lot of people saying, I want to know how long they've been in there.
Well, I had an interesting thing. I signed up for a certification exam for my electronic health records. And they asked if I want to take it online. I said, well, of course. Well, apparently they subcontract with a company that does online proctoring of exams. And I watched the demo. They actually have a webcam. They watch me.
Oh, interesting.
Then they make me show the camera around the room so that there's no one there, who's helping me, or my dog doesn't have a microphone attached or whatever. And then they have you hold up ID. They verify the ID, and they track your eye movements. Now, I haven't done it yet. I'm hoping to do it at the end of the month, but it's fascinating to think what we can do. And maybe that's a better way in the future than just LMSs. You can actually see if the person is engaged and they're taking it.
Well, that reminds me, shades of 1984. That's a little spooky, but
isn't it?
But we have had our training actually tested in the old days through labs that actually did testing. They would watch where your eyes were tracking, which is why when you design your e-learning, it's so important to put buttons in certain places, comments in certain places, things that our eyes track diagonally from, in your case, from upper left to lower right. That's how our eyes kind of get down that page. So if you make somebody go up there, then back this way, then up, they're actually getting tired. Their eyes don't know where to focus. And so as a result, the training is already irritating them. They don't know they're being irritated, but something's not right. They're looking all over the place. When you start making people have to focus because it's not apparent unless you're trying to deliberately see if they're paying attention to things. It's now you've got that cognitive tiredness. So,
well, the other thing that drives me crazy is so many developers use red if you're wrong, green if you're right.
That's true.
Well,
that's kind of
green color blindness, duh.
That's true. Well, that's kind of like the stop and go and stoplights. Most people can't really read the colors that well, but they know by the position where they're at. But you're right. In e-learning, the red and green is really an old metaphor for a stoplight.
Absolutely. And I heard, I don't know if it's still true, but some states, the red is on top, the green is on the bottom, and the other states.
Well, you're right.
So I don't know.
Sometimes they're sideways. If you go to Texas or like Dallas, I've been to Dallas quite a bit. You know, here all of our lights are up and down. Oh, let me see. Now you can see me. Our lights are up and down. In Texas, they're this way usually. So they go sideways.
That's true.
And that can throw you off when you first get there and you're going, okay, I'm reading it that way, left to right. So it's red, yellow, green. Mm-hmm. And there's about 3 or 4 of them per. So you're looking at a whole mess of them trying to figure out, okay, got it. And when you have left turn only lanes, that's really kind of interesting too, because there's a lot of lights turning on and off. When you first get there, you have to kind of pay attention more than usual because it's not your normal way of looking at something. So
exactly.
It's interesting.
So maybe we need to throw out a challenge to your listeners to come up with an alternative to red and green. But and something we have to rethink.
And does it have to be a color? Now, I think a sound might be better. It doesn't really matter what color you have, but if you have a sound like when you get it right, bing, you know, something upbeat, cheery. When you get it wrong, boo, whatever. That might get people's attention more.
Oh, but Rick, then we have compliance issues, 508.
Because you can't hear.
Folks that are, exactly.
That's true.
So there's
That's true.
Maybe someday we'll see haptic feedback, that your fingers will get a warm fuzzy if it's right, and a cold something if it's wrong.
Or a slap in the face if you get it wrong. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thanks,
that goes along with those eyes that are watching you as you're doing your training.
Something.
I don't think I'd like that.
Well, I'll let you know. Maybe in part 2
once.
I can tell you. But I'm a little intimidated by it. But again, the geek in me, I want to see what it's all about. And it can't be inexpensive because supposedly there's one person watching you. Now, I'd be surprised if that's true. I would think that it's like a doctor's in the hospital where there's a nurse watching 6 patients. That was my dog is barking. I don't know if you hear her.
I thought that was an owl making believe he was a dog.
That's the dog. But in any event, so I'm wondering if it's one person really watching Alice or it's one person watching 6 people. But
that's
I'm sure they won't tell
that's
me.
true. You never know. And that's what you don't know. How many? Because they could watch 6 people. Kind of glance around. Let's hassle Alice today.
So anyhow.
It's interesting. See, that's where my geek stops. It's like, leave me alone. Just don't bother me.
Big brother, go away.
I worked as a cashier for an international hotel when I lived in Argentina for 3 years, and I had a security camera over me the whole time. So you can imagine what we did with that camera. We would make faces at it, we'd smile, we'd dance, we'd do all sorts of stuff to the camera because a lot of times there was nothing going on. So it was you and the camera, and we became friends.
So did you get the part?
I didn't get the part. No. I think I actually got fired, but that was another issue.
That's another episode.
That's another episode. It was a crummy job anyway. But it was an interesting place to be. I was during the World Cup in 1978. That was a long time ago. So that was interesting. But
was the World Cup made out of stone in those days that guys chipped away?
I don't remember. It was just some sort of bronze statue or something. I don't remember what it was, or maybe it was gold. That was a long time ago. I don't even remember. The ball colors were different back then. I think they were orange. They didn't have the squares in those days.
Wow.
So that was a long time ago. And I happened to be living in Argentina when they had that. And they won, of course, that one World Cup. So it was mass pandemonium for about 2 days. People in the street, millions of people in the streets just celebrating. And I would always go, so you won a soccer game and you're out here celebrating and the government is screwing you right and left every which way you can think of, but no one complains. Okay, I get it. We have 1,000% inflation, but that's not worth getting angry about.
No,
Yeah.
it's diversion.
It's a diversion. It's a great
we just went
distraction.
through, the World Cup here. The ladies team won.
Yes.
And they played in Vancouver,
Yeah.
Washington, B.C., right above us.
Yeah, very close.
And one of the players is local, so that was kind of cool. So Seattle went crazy when World Cup happened.
Oh,
here.
did they really?
But
Yeah, I can imagine.
They did. They did.
It was a good game.
Hey, I'm going to have to step away for a second because the dog is reprimanding me. So do you mind if I just step
go
away
ahead.
for 2 seconds? Hey, thanks. I have to unplug too, otherwise I'll take the mic with me. So I'll be right back, Rick. Okay.
So while she's going to take care of her dog, I think he's going to become dinner tonight. No, just kidding. We are about to wrap up the show. She doesn't know that yet, so we'll surprise her when she comes back. But it's interesting. Alice, when you get to know her, is actually very funny. She's very engaging, nice person to be around. And she does a lot of work in some of the current e-learning authoring tools. I know she does a lot of work with Adobe Captivate and things like that. There, you're back. I was telling people secrets about you, but you're back, so I didn't say a word.
Okay. Or I can go disappear if you want.
No,
it's
that's
okay.
fine, that's fine.
Yeah, it's funny. The dog is really clever that way. Anytime I'm on the telephone or I don't know, talking to you, she'll bark because I'm not paying attention to her.
Interesting.
So that's what that just was.
So she goes out and hangs
sorry.
out with the owls for a little bit.
She barks at the owls too. It's good for them. But so far they haven't attacked her, so we're good. But yeah, Captivate is where I'm at. But it's kind of interesting. Today I interviewed with the state of Washington, and they asked me what my articulate skills were, and I said, well, I pretty much am Captivate, and they said, well, we're pretty much Articulate because that's much easier for our folks to learn. So now I'm going to learn some new skill sets.
Yeah, Articulate's not that hard to learn. It's pretty straightforward. And
I think so.
It just like Captivate, it has its good and bad points, but it's a pretty cool tool. As long as you know your PowerPoint, Articulate's easy. Because it takes that metaphor on, though it has different capabilities. But it's a good tool. We use a lot of Articulate. We use Lectora, Articulate, Captivate, just for different things and also what the client wants.
Exactly
those
right.
are the main
And I'm
tools.
finding more and more clients want Articulate.
Interesting,
So,
yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully I'll edit this stuff out, but Belgium and I were talking about it today, and she's
Well, no, we're
adamant
not
that
editing this out. We don't
Articulate is
edit
bad.
anything out, so be careful.
Oh, you thought, okay, oops, I thought you did.
Yeah.
But anyhow, it's interesting about Articulate and Captivate because I had used Captivate for a long time, and now I'm learning that there's other tools out there. But I do like the power of Adobe. I like the fact that I've got Photoshop, that I've got Audition, that I've got Illustrator, and in that sense, they're pretty special. But people like PowerPoint too.
PowerPoint does a good job. For some kind of training, it's great. It's easy and it's good. And of course, most of the authoring tools can import PowerPoint.
That's right.
To one point and to one level or another. And that also can save you a lot of time and effort depending on what you're trying to do.
But here's an interesting thing. A couple of years ago, I did some contract work for Microsoft. And interesting, they used Captivate for their software capture. It was very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, because none of their tools actually worked with it. But
exactly. And I
actually,
use my
Microsoft
Mac,
is doing well right now. They're actually coming back to life. They got rid of what's his name, Ballmer, and all of a sudden they're now energetic. They're lively. They're coming out with new versions that are actually exciting. They're doing stuff. It's funny how one person can actually bring a whole company down.
And so now he bought a basketball team. So we'll see how they do. So.
Oh, poor team.
So yeah, but no, actually, Microsoft has had a huge round of layoffs. Folks in their phone, the Nokia, whatever.
Oh, really? That's true.
The Apple,
yeah.
So
though the Nokia line is still being done by Nokia separately from Microsoft, so they still retain a certain amount of. Some things got joined together, and other things were still left independent. They're owned by Microsoft, but they have a certain amount of autonomy. So the new Windows 10 phone, when it comes out, looks like it's going to be really nice. From what I've seen, I think I might get one as a secondary phone just to learn it.
But you're a little bit of a geek, huh?
A lot of bit of a geek.
A lot of a geek.
Yeah, especially with video, audio gear. That's really geeky stuff. But phones, let's see. This is my current phone. Button on the back, which is different. And that's the LG G4.
Wow.
Very good little phone. It's a phablet size, 5.5 inches. Nice phone. Though the first one I got broke within 3 weeks. Not that I broke it. The video card only would show half the screen. Period. It was just like, whoa, that's not good. It was a bad video card inside the phone. Verizon was very decent, replaced it like that instantly. No questions asked. They looked at it and went, okay. And I said, how many have had this? They go, you're the first. That's not
So
nice.
is it half empty or half full?
It's cracked.
So it wasn't even half empty, half full.
It's just cracked.
That was an old magazine. Do you remember Cracked magazine?
Oh, I used to
Or
love
was
Cracked and
magazine?
Mad magazine. Yeah, I read them both.
Exactly. Great
Probably
stuff.
explain some of the issues I've had, but that's okay.
What Me Worry?
What
Right,
me worry.
exactly.
Alfred E. Newman.
Good
Those
guy.
were
He
fun
ran for
mag- they were good
president. I don't think he
satires.
won, though. He ran for president.
He did,
Didn't
Alfred,
Alfred E.
and he
Newman?
should have
He
won,
did.
considering, but then we won't go there.
Never mind.
Anyway. Well, Alice, it's been a pleasure having you on. We're going to have you on again when Susan gets back, because she has much more intelligent questions than I do. It'll be interesting, and also just to keep in touch with what you're doing, because you're always doing something, and you're very active in the community and doing things and just active. So I think that'll be fun to have you back on and to learn more about what you do and how you do it, and maybe one day on Life Edge, another show we'll have your husband on talking about how owls. Actually, one last question before we finish.
Yes.
It is called Life Edge, and it's all about that edge you get in life. What would you say, what edge have you gotten in life out of a particular skill, ability, or something? What do you think gave you that something that helped you stand out?
My edge is something that my dad taught me, and he taught me that I am no better or I'll get it right. I am no better or nor worse than anyone else. What I mean by that is that we're all equal. So when I talk to people, when I listen to people, I treat everyone like I want to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
And I can hear so many awesome stories and learn so many things by talking to different people and listening to them. So
Yeah, it's kinda
I'm no
like the
better
golden rule.
nor any worse than anyone else.
Yeah, a simple golden rule. I think we're all
Indeed.
born equal, and it all falls apart from there. But that's
Indeed.
society
Well,
has a way of
thanks for-
ruining certain things.
Well, thanks for putting up with me. I appreciate it. This is my first time in front of the camera.
Really?
And,
First time?
I do appreciate it. Yep.
That's
Before it was
good.
just voice.
Well, you
So
did well.
There you go.
You did well.
Thank you.
And we will see you on the next one. And if you're watching the show, please subscribe. We have a like and a dislike button. Veer to the like. We prefer that one. But if you dislike it, let us know. And subscribe, because if you subscribe, then you'll find out when we have the shows, and we'll be able to keep in touch with you. So thank you for watching the show. And Alice, thank you for being on. We really appreciate you. And I know Susan would have loved meeting you today. She felt really badly that she couldn't make it, but she'll be back another time. So again, for everybody, thanks for watching the show, and we will see you all next week on Life Edge. Thanks. Bye-bye.